Welcome to the City of Madeira Beach Local Planning Agency Planning Commission meeting, Monday, March 22nd, 2021 at 6 p.m. in the Commission chambers. I had a announcement from the city to make that when the commissioners speak this evening, would you please state your name first, because she's having a hard time understanding who it is through the mask. This meeting's called to order, so could we please have the roll?
Commissioner Gaither.
Here.
Commissioner Brooks. Here. Commissioner Preston.
Here.
Commissioner Kerr.
Here.
Commissioner Wyckoff.
Here.
Commissioner Noble.
Here.
We have a quorum, Chair.
Agenda item number 3, public comment. The public is encouraged to participate. And number 4, approval of the minutes from February 15th, 2021.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
We have an email to be read into the record for public comment. Ms. Portell will read that.
Okay.
This, actually, it's a public comment to do with an item that's on the agenda, so we would wait and hear it during public response on the Schooners project.
Okay.
Pretty sure that's the point. And also, we had a request from Mr. Murphy to ask if it was possible to move his item up, since the other item may go kind of long and he's got a lot of traveling to do tonight.
I think it's fine with me, but do we have to vote on it?
Yes, on an agenda rearrangement, you would, yes.
Can we take a vote on rearranging the agenda for Mr. Murphy?
So we'll vote on hearing number C first and then number B?
That is correct.
Okay. Commissioner Gaither?
Agree.
Commissioner Brooks? Commissioner Preston?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Wyckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Noble?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous.
Okay, on to number 4, approval of the minutes, February 15th, 2021. Anybody have any problem with the minutes? Sounds like the minutes were fine. Can we go to a vote for approval?
Commissioner Gaither?
Approved.
Commissioner Brooks? Approved. Commissioner Kerr?
Approved.
Commissioner Wyckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Noble?
Yes.
The vote is unanimous.
Okay, on to agenda item number 5, new business. We are going to jump to agenda item C, coastal management element text revisions. Mr. Murphy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Jerry Murphy with the University of Florida. So what you have before you in your packet for item number C are the comprehensive coastal management plan crosswalk and model language. This is model language that was developed by the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council and Tampa Bay Estuaries Program. This was developed over the course of a couple years and was finally finalized last year, 2020, in April. And what the estuary program is suggesting or recommending is the policies that you would adopt into your comprehensive plan in either the coastal management element or the conservation element. Yours are combined. Your draft also shows a separation of those two elements as they are separately considered in the statute. So there's not a problem with combining them, and I think the idea that we've come up with is to have sub-elements headed by Goal 8 and Goal 9, Goal 8 being the coastal management, goals, objectives, and policies, and Goal 9 being the objectives and policies regarding conservation. But keeping them in the same element because they're so interactive here in Madeira Beach. So what I'm looking for is a recommendation on the CCMP crosswalk language. They have provided 2 options, and there's also an opportunity to pick and choose, but there's broad and general options that leave the implementation of the more general policies to the land development regulations. The more stringent and specific are in the event that you want to put in the comprehensive plan that type of stringent language. That's strictly a call from you. What most people in the area are doing is adopting the broad or general ones, but that's generally at the county level, where they have more undeveloped land than, say, Madeira Beach does, so that you're more built out. The idea of more stringent or specific policies is certainly something that you can address. And there's 4 basic objectives on each of the 4 pages. One is for adaptation strategies, one is for reduction of pollution and stormwater, the third is to increase the diversity of bay habitat, and apparently you have 2 3s. Apologize for that. Anyway, that's one aspect of it. Because you're doing the evaluation and appraisal report for your comprehensive plan now, and we're looking at the conservation and coastal management element, this is a good time to consider how you would like to go with that. There's no requirement that they be adopted, but it is a regional effort that's been put behind this, again, spending quite a bit of time and involving all of the counties and many of the member municipalities. The second half, then, is the actual coastal conservation and coastal management element. It's been reorganized to clearly separate coastal management from conservation. There's been the normal cleanup that we've been doing with your comprehensive plan in terms of making the language more accessible. And then the final thing is that the provisions are included to address the peril of flood requirements from the 2015 legislation that the state adopted to address climate change, sea level rise, flooding, flood insurance issues. Not sure how you want to proceed with this. If you have a lot of comments, we can go page by page. If there are some specific comments, we can just identify those by the page number of the packet. That's completely up to you, but what we're looking for ultimately today is, if you're comfortable, a recommendation of something to the Board of Commissioners, because ultimately that's got to be part of their ear. The way I think that we've organized this is we're going to bring an element to you all, maybe 2 if they're small, for a meeting, go through that element, get a recommendation, and that recommendation will kind of wait until all of the comprehensive plan has been reviewed, and then that'll go to the board for adoption, and I think that has to happen before December. So that's my presentation for now, and I'm happy to have a conversation however you want to proceed.
Does anybody have any questions?
So at this point, you're just looking for us to basically determine whether we think we should go towards the broader end of the spectrum or the stringent, and then we're going to, in latter meetings, break down each one of these elements to look at them individually?
Well, for the comprehensive coastal management plan, yes, it'd be direction for general or specific, and then we would bring those back in a sort of this ordinance format without the ordinance, because we're not there yet, to include. But I'm particularly, I don't know if it's the same with you, but there's a page missing, or a page has been duplicated, so you don't have the complete benefit of the entire package. We may want to go ahead and just table that so you have the best information and just focus on the coastal management conservation element itself.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a comment, or a question, really. So, with the broad, does the broading include just on that left-hand side, but
Yes,
the
sir.
specific includes both?
No. The specific sort of includes the ideas of the broad, but they're more specific policies.
Okay, just the numbering, I thought maybe it included both. The specific included all the general, but then drilled down on each of those.
No, they're numbered differently just to keep them separated to avoid confusion.
Okay.
Kind of like the confusion that we have currently in the comprehensive plan with regard to each element being numbered the same. which we're addressing as part of this as well.
Robert Preston. So I would consider the broad more than the stringent, because as the stringent, we have enforcement issues anyway, so, we don't have the manpower to do the stringent, period. I guess as issues come up, I think the broad would be a much better option, so to speak.
Any other comments? Linda, does the staff have anything to add to that?
Here I have one more comment on one of the items in the elements.
Go to Robert first. Go ahead.
Robert Preston. Page 57, policy 2, and it has to do with the, how often they give the training. There's nothing in there that states whether it's yearly or whether it's monthly, bi-yearly, every 5 years, or whatever.
Which number, Mr. Preston?
Page 57. You know, I totally messed up the page. I lost it. Policy 1, 2. Oh, there it is. In the city, in cooperation with Pinellas County Department of Emergency Management and South Pinellas County Chapter Red Cross, will sponsor preparedness seminars to increase hurricane awareness. There's no time frames in there.
No, sir, and that's usually done annually, and the county is kind of in the driver's seat of that. We're just saying that we're going to cooperate. And this is a standing policy. We've just cleaned it up to change shall to will and renumber it.
And actually, we've been sponsoring a specific workshop or seminar every year for the island communities, and we've been coordinating with the county so that all the islands can actually get full LMS and CRS credit for that. We've got one coming up. We're trying to plan in April that includes an expo for the public to come and look at supplies.
I thought we had one annually, and
Yeah,
that's why
we do.
I don't understand why we don't put it in there, so that.
Well, there's a requirement for us to either do it or participate in one annually. It's just it's a requirement of our other programs, LMS and the CRS. So we could say that you could put that in there.
I think it's beneficial to the community.
Mm-hmm.
So if we added the word annual between sponsor and preparedness, would that address that?
Yes.
Okay. No problem.
All right, nice eye. Linda, did you have something to say?
Well, when you're making decisions about whether to be stringent or specific, I mean, really look through each side of the policy, because we are going to have to really, living out here, going to really have to embrace the issues of sea level rise and the impact it's having on environmental quality. And you may find things in the stringent or specific section you think would complement the things that are on the other side. And so, it's not an all or nothing situation there. They may already be included generally under broad or general, but, it's worth you really reading both sides and thinking, well, maybe this is better over here. And we could have some set of policy that's more or less broad, but has some specifics on things we really know we have to get our heads and our hearts around. changes that we have to make to the way we're dealing with coastal and environmental issues.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comment? And I would assume Linda, the public comment was not about this topic, the email you have? Okay. Well, then I guess, we need a motion for recommendation.
Yes, sir.
Mike, you're the motion man.
So, I would like to make the motion that we, work on the broad or general version of the, CCMP crosswalk model language guidelines, on which we base our going forward.
Do we have to add Robert's comment into the motion?
I think
Yes.
Mr. Wyckoff captured that.
Okay. Can we get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. We go to the vote.
Commissioner Gaither?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Preston?
Robert?
Thinking.
No.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Wyckoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Noble?
Yes.
The vote passes 5-1.
Okay, thank you. Back to, agenda item 5, new business. A, schooner rezoning to plan development, PD 2021-01, development agreement.
Mr. Chair, usually at this point, we would allow the petitioner to come up and make their presentation first, and the staff can make comments. That gives us also the opportunity to respond. I think there's at least one typo in the chart on the building code summary, things like that they want to address. So it's better to have all the information and get their thoughts on it, project, and see what they've got to say. And then you've already got the staff report. We can go over that in more detail afterwards.
So we'll jump to, agenda item 5B, schooner rezoning to plan development, the schooner full set. Is that what the applicant presentation?
Thank you, Commissioners.
Drive safe, Mr. Murphy.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Jeff Beggins, here at the 429 Boca Ciega Drive. I'm one of the owners of the new schooner project that we're bringing in front of you guys tonight. So what I wanted to start with, before we get into the details here, is just kind of this, where we were and where we are, and kind of how we got here. So some of you may remember about 2 years ago, we went through planning and zoning, and then went through the commission meeting 1, and then it paused during commission meeting 2, before it even went to a vote, right? So, and then we hit COVID, and then we hit other issues, so basically hit a pause on the project. And at that time, there was some resistance. At that time, if you guys remember, it was a building on the west side, building on the east side, and a bridge across. And then some people didn't like that, so we redrew it and took everyone's considerations in. And we pretty much just paused it, ran the hotel, probably during the worst period in time in the world to have a hotel running, but we did it. And then we took some time and paused and revisited it. And we spent a lot of time thinking about this. You guys know I've been here for a long time. I love this town, I live here, and put a lot into it. My dad's a partner in it too, and Kevin, who owns the Cambria, is partners in it too. So you got a lot of people who care a lot about this project. So we spent a lot of time talking with Miss Natalie, who's here, Natalie Glaze, who's the president of Erie Dam, who's our direct neighbor. And when we went back to the drawing board on this project, we spent a lot of time with that board, multiple meetings, to figure out what can we develop there that would get some good buy-in, a good respect for being good neighbors. And we went from a big rectangle building that would in essence block the whole view of the south side of that building to working with them to redesign and restructure it into an L-shaped building, which would give them all preserve their view corridors on that left side of that building. And then, in essence, from doing that one, we had to redesign from a rectangle to an L, right? So by doing from a rectangle to an L, if you take out a part of the rectangle, we spread it around the L, which caused us to go up a little bit. So we spent some time with that board saying, do you guys like this? Do you guys want this? And then it seemed to be pretty unanimous from the neighbors and for us to make sure we did that. So you're going to see the project redesigned with input from what I believe are really the only true affected parties next to this project. So that's what we're going to do. So we're excited about this, to really clean up a section of the beach that could use a little cleaning up. And we're very excited about this project. So I think with that, we have Jack Boziak here, and Kevin will say through a few words too.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, I apologize, it slipped my mind, but we have representation here. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding, and so it's good for us to be reminded what the procedures are and get everybody who's going to testify sworn in. Anybody who's going to testify or wants to speak on the issue tonight can be sworn in. That's common. It's kind of a semi-judicial process going through zoning change. And we have an expert here to explain it to us a little better.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Robert Eschenfelder with the City Attorney's Office. I'm your board attorney. And so at this point, I would, anybody that's going to be testifying tonight, including who already spoke, if you could just stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're going to give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, sir.
Evening. My name is Kevin Bowden, owner of the Cambria Hotel, which just opened across the bay there, and partner with Jeff and Jim on the schooner. Very excited to get the schooner going. It's been a hotel that was kind of let to run down. Been a tough area, a tough hotel to really run, probably the way Madeira Beach would like to see it run, and the way we would like to run it. The clientele has been challenging, let's say. When COVID rolled in, as you know, most of you have read and heard, probably the hotel business took its toughest tumble since '07 or '08. Seems to be coming back. We feel we can get this hotel built. We feel we can get it financed, get it built, and make it be a really successful part of what we're doing down here at Madeira Beach, and I'm sure what the city would want. In that, initially, when the plan that was presented last time, we had some of the guest rooms were on the east side of Gulf, some were on the west side. I think we had 40 units on the west side, 16 on the east side. It became important that we move all the rooms to the west side. Building two buildings, much more expensive. I think that it did mean we had to take a little more height. So with the new height, Jeff really spent a lot of time meeting with our neighbors, making sure that everybody was good with it. I think that, on the east side, we're proposing a parking lot there. I think we can work with FDOT to get that crosswalk moved in front of our property. We're going to have to. Somebody just got hurt badly or even killed last week there. It's a really tough place to cross. Our parking is currently across the street. Just to give you a little more information, we're currently operating the property. Brian Zielinski still owns it. We're on a 3-year lease with a purchase option. So we are operating it. We have 31 guest rooms and 11 apartments. So there's a total of 42 units there now. There's 5 different buildings. There's 3 on the beach, and there's 2 on the east side. That'll all be consolidated into one building, which will be 4 units, or 56, Jeff, or 4? 56 units. So unit-wise size, we're only going from really what is currently 42 up to 56. You know, Jack was also our designer on the Cambria. I don't know how many of you got a chance to come over, but that's been going really well for us so far. And I welcome your comments, and I'm here if you have any additional questions, okay? Thanks.
Good evening. I have some boards here that if I would set one or two.
Mind stating your name for the record,
Jack
sir?
Boziak,
Thank you.
architect, and I'm the agent representing the owners. I have some boards here that I can kind of just put a few of them around to make it a little bit easier to see the design and how it was put back together. Some of you will recall that we originally came in, it's been over 2 years actually, and we've really had 2 runs through Planning Commission, and we were going to the Planning Board with the second run when we had withdrawn it, and we had another design underway. Just to clarify what Kevin was stating about the 42 units, the additional units to make up the 56 come from across the street. The density across the street provided another 14 units that allowed us. So we're within the allowable. We're not asking for an increase in density or anything like that. It is the use of the both. Rather than have 14 units on one side and 42 on the other, we felt it was better to consolidate it all to one location and attempt to really do a really first-class resort hotel there. The building that was originally, if you may remember the original buildings that we came in and got approved initially, we had a very almost Gothic, the idea at the time with the owners was that we were going to do a hotel that was along the lines of like Don Cesar, something that people would classically remember. It went to a little bit of a more tempered image of that, which we did put in for presentation. We did have some neighborhood meetings, and then we withdrew that to go to an even simpler version, at which time that we decided to withdraw it from the marketplace for the time being. Subsequent to that, the project, Jeff Beggins and Kevin Bowden went ahead and got into negotiations and discussions with the adjacent neighbors at the air dam. And the reason that it was kind of important to the people next door was in the old configuration, with the lower height, it basically covered the property under even the previously approved one. And it kind of blocked their view on an angle down the beach. So what we were asked to do was to try and do a little bit more neighborhood-friendly or neighbor-friendly, pull everything back, go a little bit higher, and allow their view to not be wall-to-wall, which makes a lot of sense, and we really didn't have any trouble with. So basically, we went about a redesign that you have before you that is the 56 units, the exact same number that are there presently on the Gulf side, combined with the density shifted over from the Bay side. The building essentially is 7 living floors over the parking and recreation areas. We have a roof deck that is included in that. That it has a tiki bar, and more or less not really a tiki bar, but the idea was it was going to be a sort of a wedding venue, a takeoff a little bit of what we have over here at the Cambria, that is more site-specific to the use of people that have the weddings on the beach, where they have big gatherings that come in and be more of an attraction right on the beach. So it was more or less an answer to what we thought would we had learned from some of the lessons at the Cambria as to both site-specific. If you do notice on the Cambria, we were somewhat limited in the site size to the point that it was a very tight site. And we had a really difficult time trying to get everything in there that we needed to. It was a really exceptionally difficult site to design around. In this case, it also is a tight site, but we have the site across the street where we're not dividing the development between the two of them, with residential on one side, crosswalks coming over to the facilities on the other side. So we felt that this consolidation really gave us a better product and a better project. At the same time, in the discussions with the air dam people, they were very encouraged by the fact that we were opening a review corridor, so they were actually looking across the open area where the pool was, instead of having a building, basically 30 feet away. Having said that, let me familiarize you with the statistics on this, which I know you have before you. The building, as I said, there it is. The building consists of the same 56 units that were the combined density of what exists right now on the schooner site, and the 14 units transferred density from across the street. Across the street, we have two alternative plans, and the reason we did is, way back in the beginning, the city had an interest in retaining the ability to maybe put some commercial retail space along the first floor rather than have parking along the street. So, package that allows for up to 9,000 square feet of retail commercial. That retail commercial on the first level, the reason it's a questionable thing is it has mixed results, and sometime right now I don't think the market is ready for it, but we planned on having plenty of parking in order to accommodate that, or accommodate whatever did happen across the street. Whether it remained parking or whether we eventually came back in to receive or request approval of a commercial strip underneath there. The building basically is in a VE, the Gulf side is a VE 12 and a VE 14 zone, velocity zone. Across the street, it's an AE 11 and an AE 12. The total land, aggregate land of these two parcels is 49,470 square feet, which is about 1.1. The building as proposed is 63 feet above BFE plus 2 to the roof deck, the rooftop. The FAR, there was an error in the plan that you have before you in the site data table. It was resubmitted, and somehow it didn't find its way through. The error doesn't really matter because we don't exceed the FAR, but they just somehow got we did submit a paper to Zane before he had left, and we had some revised drawings, and I think that there were 2 or 3 times that we had put in additional clarifications, and somehow this typo got back in. The FAR is actually 1.185. The allowable is 1.2. So it is within the boundaries of the code. The impervious surface area allowable is 0.7, and the impervious surface ratio in this is 68.50. As I say, we have basically a pool recreation area above the parking, and then we have the guest room levels above with the rooftop facility. Basically, there's really not a lot more to be said about it. It's what we think is a reasonable approach to trying to preserve the view of the people next door and keep a building that makes the best utilization of the Gulf front and doesn't necessarily build on both sides of the road and create something that isn't quite as desirable, just in the name of trying to keep the density right where it is. So with that in mind, we also have a total of, actually we have 83 parking spaces. The 76 regular spaces, the 3 handicap spaces, the bicycle parking credit, and the motorcycle credits. So we do have a more than abundant required 56 spaces plus 1 for the resort facility. Now, having said all this, I think that the building has taken a lot of consideration over the last few years, and I think where we've wound up is really a reasonable conceptual accommodation of the neighbors and the intent of the use of the site, highest and best use of the site, while not really spreading it out too far. So with that in mind, I mean, I can answer any questions you may have, and, I'd be glad to kind of fill in the gaps or whatever.
Any questions from the commissioners?
Commissioner Eric Gaither, so you mentioned that across the street on the east side, there's a plan for potential commercial development on the bottom. In the meantime, while this is built, will that just be parking, or will that?
No, in the meantime, it's just parking, two-level park, it's a single level initially, and if the intent was down the road to build, we would go with a second level of parking above. It was something that really the financial and the economic and base for something like that right now, especially after the '08 and all that, there are commercial strips up and down Gulf Boulevard that are available, so we felt that it was something we ought to, the city was encouraging a multi-use type thing where you could, down the road someplace, potentially come back and ask for a commercial strip right on the road, especially across from that big parking area that's there. So we did put it in. We have no plans for it. We would have to come back naturally with plans specific to what we would be putting in there. At that time, we would build a second level parking, elevate the parking up, and maintain a number of parking spaces on the ground level. We blocked in just a big, in your presentation, you'll see it's just a big area and kind of colored in that is not specifically any kind of a building or anything. It's just, that is something that we thought we would bring up now. It's not something that we have in any immediate plans, and it would have to come back to the commission for review when it becomes site-specific.
Ray, you have a question?
Yeah, it's partly to Linda as well. Storing the plans and the setback off of Gulf Boulevard, I know with the comprehensive plan, it's going to push to actually bring the building line closer to Gulf Boulevard. That is in discussion and consideration during the design, possibly giving you more square footage on each level, because I know the other thing is, and it was before my time, but I know, you know, all the talk about the building height seems to be the biggest concern of the
Yes, we would like to see more of an urban standard and a pedestrian-friendly standard for development along Gulf Boulevard. You know, we don't have people walking by big empty spaces with just parking, but have activities and interesting developments along Gulf Boulevard closer to the sidewalk with parking in the rear. That builds a stronger economic base for and support. And which is why when they came in talking about this before, I always ask, where is there going to be retail on the bottom of that parking? That's what I'm always looking for and encouraging. In regards to the building on the west side, and when they first came with this design, we were under kind of a different policy direction and interest from the commission, and I was having a hard time getting through the importance of this pedestrian connection. And historically, the city, as you can see, has been built in a suburban style with everything pushed back in the parking lots up front, which is, as it turns out, not a great idea. It's not even good for traffic, really, traffic management and safety. So it's been, you know, getting to the point where the community understands this is embracing more of a mixed-use, pedestrian, supportive environment. Has been a work in progress. And when they first came in, I think they were looking towards providing that green space and a little bit more openness up front that was more consistent with the current code and the way that we have been doing it over time. Your point is good. It's really good. And this is a PD. You know, you can ask for additional requirements or make additional design demands that you wouldn't be able to in a standard development, and that's kind of the point in doing a PD. I don't know how much flexibility they have at this point. I also want to point out that this actually went all the way through first reading with the commission and was approved on first reading. And then we pulled back, not just because the timing wasn't right, but even more than that, we had a problem with our PD ordinance. You remember all the months of going through the PD ordinance and amending it so that it was strong enough to support the development review process effectively, and that wouldn't be challenged in court every time we moved forward with it, as the town center was. So it took a back seat. Everything got put on hold. In addition, there were sections in our code with like hidden or unknown section on notice that we wanted to go back and all the way to the planning commission anyway and do the review over to make sure we noticed everything properly. And so what's happened over time, instead of coming back with the same thing and doing it over, things have changed, times have changed, and as they're explaining to me, the market doesn't really have as much flexibility as it needs to support the use on both sides. They're concerned about the traffic. The neighbors who came before were very supportive of the project, but they wanted it to emphasize the safety of people crossing over from one side to the other because they sit in their apartments or they kind of look out at conflict all the time between pedestrians and traffic. So that's some of what's going on here. When they came in with this version, and I asked for retail to continue as a possibility on the parking across the street. The purpose in marking it out as a potential site for that mixed-use development later was so that they don't have to come all the way back through a hearing and an amendment to the PD process. It's already being contemplated, so it's worth talking about. It's important to talk about that eventual mixed-use, mixed parking and retail building because you would be giving recommending approval for it or denial depending on what you come up with at the end of these meetings, so that they can come back through for development review, which you will also see, but it won't be coming back to amend the PD and go through the whole hearing. It would just be a one hearing arrangement for development review later. So now Jack would like to respond to the issue about the proximity to the street and the open space up front.
Yeah, I think that, there is a big trend towards going towards building up close to the street. It has its pluses and minuses. A lot of people hate it. A lot of people really like it. So you get a mixed reading on that depending on who you speak to and what their view on it is. To move it up to the street at this point and do that would take a pretty comprehensive redesign at this time. And I think that this project's been around for a couple years. I'd rather that if there was a consideration for that, we could maybe revisit that as a separate application or a separate submittal, because I do know that the present group has really put a lot of time and effort and money into trying to get this thing so that the anticipated 2 years that it'll take to get through this process, plan approval process for permits, begin construction, complete construction, go through the opening phases. I would hate to see us, if we took it as a separate consideration, I would be agreeable to coming back and looking and investigating that possibility. But we'd like to be able to move ahead with what we've got right now. Yeah.
Hi, it's Kevin Bowden again. At the same time, I'm also building a new hotel on St. Pete Beach. We'll be the first one there. Miramar Resort, it's right down by the Bon Air, right down towards the Don. So FDOT's going to have to weigh in here. I just went through that there. We're a little bit further ahead. We've already had planning board approval. We've had the first commission approval there. And, in between, we pulled FDOT in. right? So FDOT is gonna be involved here as well. Currently, there's parking in front of all the Schooners buildings, right, which is really a mess. It's almost like a continuous curb cut on Gulf, right? FDOT's gonna like trim that right down, give us, one in and out. They're gonna want a certain radius curve. They're gonna want certain views that people have from they're even dictating how tall our plants can be, right? So, once we get past this, that whole entrance area, what's happening there, we're gonna need to request that they move the flashing light down for us so our guests can cross. It doesn't do too much good over at the parking lot there. When you think about it, the parking lot, people park in the parking lot to go to the beach, so you don't really need a flashing light to get across the street. You're already kind of there, right? Our guests just simply won't walk down to that light, even though it's only, 40 yards away, and they dodge across the street and people get hurt. So, we know FDOT pretty well. We just redid 150 at the Madeira Way, and now we're working on the Miramar project. I think the site plan is gonna change from where it is today once we pull FDOT in, a little bit, because we have to get their approval on it, and that's all I wanted to speak to. Really?
I have a question about the crosswalk moving. Have you guys contacted Pinellas County about moving it? Do you have any thoughts, do they have any thoughts on moving it? Because that's a county park.
Well, we really haven't talked to them yet.
Okay.
It's gonna be more an FDOT call than a Pinellas call. FDOT, it's their road. They're pretty territorial about the fact that the road is theirs. And, I think it's gonna be hard, and maybe we can pay to put another one down further for them, because these two will be too close to each other. And we're okay doing that as well. But, I think the hotel has to have one. The hotel should have one now. It's an unsafe, FDOT's gonna work with us to make it safer, right? Because they're all about that. And I think, we will have to bring the county lot into it and figure out how it all plays out. But, that's kind of our next step. I've already reached out to FDOT. I've already talked to them. We need to have, as soon as we got through this and got into the commission meetings, we were gonna huddle up as we get more detailed on our site plan.
I think moving it's a great idea. I just think that if you could pull the county in to help you, it would be beneficial to you to get it done, because they work with FDOT and a lot more roads than one crosswalk.
Yeah, we'll absolutely do that. We'll pull the county in as well.
Yeah, some of the things that FDOT does bring into account are the vision triangles, for example. And so that's why it's a little more delicate of a situation, as Kevin had mentioned, and I think right now that would be something that could take an amount of time. But we'd be glad to look into, possible future amendment if the ownership team wanted to go in and try and do anything further on that.
Mr. Chair, you can't promise to amend something later. If you're going to amend it, you'd need to make your recommendations, remembering that you're in an advisory capacity with this item. This goes to the city commission anyway. But on top of that, you can't have a zoning promise to amend itself later. This is the whole point in the PD. If you're comfortable with it, you are going to have to take another crack at it when we get all the real details in it. We're going to have to bring a site plan back in to make sure the site plan is consistent with just the codes that were required here, but not to the level of trying to move the building, because the placement of the building is part of the PD concept plan, and moving a whole building would require going back through this entire process. It's nothing we can negotiate later.
Okay, but the crosswalk discussion, that's okay?
Yes, because you cannot get approval from FDOT or any state agency until your zoning is approved.
Okay.
They will not give it. By law, they won't do it.
Yes, just a comment. I know there was a lot of kickback about the crosswalk, the bridge over.
Right.
Nobody really wanted that, and apparently it's, I think everybody will be happy to see that gone away, and I think that the unintended consequences of the crosswalks is beneficial because it stops traffic and allows you to make a left-hand turn onto Gulf Boulevard. So I'm all for putting it on the street level as long as people are safe. Any other questions?
Robert Preston. So we have to have another public meeting as well on this, or is it,
We go before the, city commission, on this.
so there's no public input or anything, it's beyond
Yes,
that?
and if I could explain what we're going through right now. This is kind of a two-part meeting. You won't be voting tonight, and partially because although we noticed everything technically appropriately, we were concerned that one of the maps was not, could have been misread. So we went back and did another mailing and notice on this, and we're going to have the discussion tonight, have you continue it to your next meeting, which is on the 5th, and then you can be open for public hearing. If anybody new shows up that night, then close it and vote. So you do have an opportunity to talk about it again. Hopefully you would get your questions out of the way at this point and leave it open for public comment next week. Or 2 weeks. Then the other issue, as an ordinance, they would vote on it twice, first and second reading. And then because we don't have all the details set, we will have to come back through the Planning Commission for the site plan review, because this is a concept plan. It's not your final site plan. And a final site plan of this size would have to come back through this board for review. So some of the details of just assuring that it meets all of the codes and all the conditions in the development agreement in the concept plan is what you'd be reviewing for later. Again, that's not the point. Typically on site plan you would have people moving buildings and things, but in this case, at least the location of the building, the flow of the traffic and access are things that you address in the concept hearing, so they're going to be pretty much set tonight. You'll have a little bit of flexibility because they need that just in the development process, but you don't want to put that off. It would be something that the city, if you want to include something in your recommendation to the commission, they will have to review it and talk about it as well. That's the way to do it at this point in the hearing.
Robert Preston, I still have a couple comments. Even in your documentation, you say 7 stories.
I'm sorry, what?
You say 7 stories, and I don't have any problem with the building. I think the building is great, but it's actually 9 stories, and when you mislead people, then they get up in arms, and they contact the commissioners, and they do all this other stuff. So when you talk about your building, it's actually a 9-story building, correct?
Yeah, typically they're referred to above parking or above, functional like pool decks or parking or that area. So, or in the roof deck, typically, you go to the flat of the roof deck. But, I'd be glad to address, I think we pretty much addressed the fact that there are additional levels to get to that height.
No, I'm just saying that
I'd be glad to make it more clear.
when you get in the public, the point of public opinion, if you remember the Barefoot Beach Club, it was like 5 stories, right? And people were complaining about the corner huts that were on the corner of the building, which made it 6 stories in height. So those are the type of the issues and the things that you run into. I like the building. I just think you need to call it what it is.
That's fine. I understand. Yep.
And I have a couple other questions. You're going to have a restaurant and facilities in there?
There's for the hotel in there, yes.
It'd be a hotel restaurant rather than a public restaurant?
Well, anything on the beach tends to draw people off the beach, but yeah, the primary focus is a hotel restaurant.
Overall, I think it's really, really a great project. I'm glad you brought in air dam with that. And I guess this question is for Linda. We do not have the issues that we're gonna have with the town center, with all the grief that we had with that project as a whole. Is that true?
That's really hard to address. There's been so much grief associated with I wouldn't think so. Some of the reason that there was grief with the town center is that our codes were not clear. And we've spent a lot of effort working with the development community, but also with the regulators and with our attorneys and teams of attorneys to review the amendments to our PD ordinance to ensure that we are getting through everything we need and that we're advertising properly and that we're not making promises in the ordinance that aren't kept in the site plan somewhere along the way of the process. So I would hope that all of that leads us to a better development process, a clearer development process. And then again, this is a very small project by comparison to the town center's impact. The town center had so many different pieces on two, not one, but planned for the area and what's always been a potential there. So for those reasons, I would think, no, we should not be expecting nearly the grief. And of course, it'll go up a lot faster than all the many pieces and parts for town center.
Robert Preston again. I just want to thank the Beggins, Kevin, and Mr. Bozak, bringing a project like this to, which will be quite an asset to the city when it's completed. I think it'll be one of those wow factors when it's done, I hope. Thank you very much.
Mike?
Mike Wyckoff. This is gonna be like Cambria, right? Hotel, not condo hotel? Right?
Yeah, hotel.
And then is there anything in the development plan, or the development agreement that both sites will need to be common ownership in perpetuity?
No, the development agreement does require that they continue to operate as a single development. It does not limit them to not being able to sell portions of it off. And there are a lot of different ownership arrangements that go into these mixed-use developments and even hotels nowadays.
But the operating would have to be under...
Yes, well, they have to operate as a single unit. They cannot...
the density,
Yeah.
being thrown
It's
across.
the density is transferred, and
Yeah,
so...
totally not against that at all.
You can't...
I think it's better that way than any other way, but would hate to see something down the line where that gets separated off, and now you've got a whole other set of circumstances.
No, if you were to separate that off, you would make the existing hotel non-conforming, and we can't take an action that makes a parcel non-conforming.
Good question. Anybody else?
Okay, thank you.
Sir? And now we do have, is the staff done? If not, then we'll go to public comment, or?
We have some issues we want to talk about. It's actually not that lengthy a staff report, considering it's a PD, but we tried to go through and provide you with a complete list of all the parts of a PD and check them off for you. That's what the outline structure is about, so that there not be any question later whether you considered all the items, the issues What's it? Yeah, sorry about that. There we go. So, we have, the section under, number 6 that has all the outline. Those are all the requirements of a PD. We put next to them any place where it's already provided or something needs to be provided in the future, or as in the case of, L, where it says variance, there's no variance being requested here, so of course there's none provided. But we wanted to specify that because the basis of challenge to previous PDs has been that something was missing from the packet, even though that thing could not be provided. So hopefully we've cleaned all that up. So under the development review, we've listed some additional things that will show up later in the site plan more specifically. And then there's a list of staff recommendations. That's number 7. I apologize, there's a number 1 in front of the 7. It took me forever to get this all numbered, and the computer apparently decided to rearrange things anyway. But number 1, we will require that an existing conditions demolition in CSWM, that's the Construction Surface Water Management Plan, will be required and will be available per the NTDS permit at the development review stage. So when we get to that detailed stage, they're going to have to provide that. Per Section 98-33, the silt fences and soil erosion control measures are required to be shown on the site plan at the development review stage. This isn't necessarily right. You don't need that in the concept plan, but those are site plan requirements. Per Section 14-123, all utilities serving the proposed facility must be undergrounded, and we asked them to please add a note on the final development plans that would come to site plan and show connectivity, and specifically the overhead aerial located on the north side of 145th Avenue must be undergrounded. The number 4, provide the location of the FDC, that's the fire connections, and provide authorization from FDOT for the new Crosswalk location adjacent to the property. If FDOT authorization cannot be obtained, the site plan must be reevaluated for pedestrian access. They've made a point at how concerned they are. If we get to the point that FDOT is not cooperating, we really need to look at how people are getting back and forth. But, and so we recommend that we come back and look at that site plan again. Now, under number 6, we asked them to provide a statement and a plan on their site plan when it comes in, detailing the requirement for a valet parking system for hotel guests as a condition of development plan approval. They've talked about using valet, and that would help a lot if their customers are not walking back and forth to get things out of their car or to park themselves, lugging their kids and their luggage all the way over. If they can come in, use a valet to park, it would eliminate a whole lot of our concerns and undoubtedly a lot of injury. And so we recommend that as a condition of the PD in this case. That's what PDs are for. You can be more specific than you would somebody else's plan. And then number 7, the development will be required to meet all appropriate land development regulations during the development review process, which you know we'll be looking at, but we thought we'd put it in there anyway, just in case somebody else thinks we're pushing things off or ignoring anything that site plan development process would normally require. With those, we recommend that those conditions be included in your recommendation for approval and forwarding to the City Commission. I do want to, I could answer questions. The next thing would be for you to question me. Let them question me. I'm trying to make sure I'm keeping up with everything here, Rob. We're doing all the cross-examination. So if the board has any questions.
Well, I have a comment about the staff recommendations and the planning commission making a recommendation, and I remember, like, just so the public's clear, we can make a recommendation here,
yes,
and the elected officials don't have to take our recommendation, because I remember at Barefoot, we had unanimously voted that we wanted to see them do some CO dune restoration behind the Barefoot as part of our approval, and they never did, because I think the regular commissioners So I just
Yes.
like to make that clear.
Now, when we come back for site plan review, you'll be the final authority, but in this case, with zoning, yes, you and the staff were just making recommendations or advisory. But it's always good when you make your conditions, then to make some comment on the record as to why you think they're important, and, and to include that as part of your findings on the recommendation you do make.
All right, anybody have any questions for Linda?
We do have a little bit more comment, and the other thing I wanted to bring up that doesn't show up here specifically, we can address in site plan, but you may want to include here is the discussion of activity on the beach. It's not the intent of the staff that the restaurant or anything, hotel activity regularly be scheduling service out to the beach. We've had that conversation recently about caddies. It's a very sore issue with the community. And not only that, but if the restaurant is serving actually with tables and they're taking food and drink out to the beach, it increases their impact. We would have to do a whole nother parking analysis of restrooms and all the other traffic impact, out on the road, and go all the way back to DOT for that. Also, we have to consider that here in Madeira Beach, we don't have a lot of commercial activity out on the beach. It's why it's such a sensitive issue. We've been really careful about preserving that area as either recreation, parks, or residential in quality. And because of that, we've been able to control for the impacts on the sea turtles and other environmental concerns that we have out there. Lighting is a huge issue, and it will be something that we will regulate in the site plan process. They should plan to have a lighting plan with this, and I would love to be able to work with them a little more creatively on their signs, because the sign code is not easy to use and not as flexible as today's kind of development needs. And so I usually work with the new developments on developing their own standards for signs as well. So those are some things that it would be good for you to comment on that aren't in the staff recommendations at this point, but that some of you have brought up separately in conversations.
Okay, any questions for Linda?
So would we, at this point, put in something that says that we'd like to add no food service or drink service on the beach? Is that something that would fit here?
I would rather, given we're still going to have more hearing on the 5th, that then you make all of your motions as part of your findings and recommendations in your final vote. But this is a good time for you to start talking about it if you've got specific things that you have questions on at this point. We're still kind of in the presentation and cross-examination stage here.
Basically looking at zoning and whether this is going to work at this point.
Right, exactly. And with the PD, you get more specific than you do with standard zoning. If somebody were saying we were going to turn this into a house, you wouldn't be getting into any detail because we know what houses do, and how they interact with their surroundings. But, when you do something commercial, especially in an environmentally sensitive area, or mixed use, you've always got more detail that you want in the plan. You want to be more specific about.
Mike Wyckoff here. I guess the question is there intent to have food service on the beach? That would be one thing to ask. And if there is there some sort of environmental mitigation factor that could be put in there if there was intent to even consider that in any way?
They would need to come in. Honestly, we haven't evaluated this for that kind of impact, and it would require, as I said, an entirely different level of traffic impact, environmental impact, parking requirements. The parking requirements that they're putting, because if you've got more people on and you're serving more people, you're going to be able to draw more people in. That's
Or is there a way, as a hotel operator, could limit the service to only registered guests, and there's a way to police that in any way?
Not unless you want to hire more code enforcement. I mean, we're always talking about let's just enforce more, but we've got a code enforcement staff
Right on.
of exactly 2, for both buildings and zoning control. And we talk about that a lot at the commission nowadays, because they would like us enforcing all kinds of things, and we're
Yeah.
like, we're not there, we don't have
I
that.
mean, we haven't really talked about it yet, but the intent here is to operate a full-service hotel, where essentially we are catering to our hotel guests that are in the parking lot, that we have ample parking spots for. There will be people walking up from the beach, to eat and to drink. And I would think that we would do weddings. This particular hotel, I think we own to the high water mark, on at least half of the frontage, right? So I think that's probably us pulling a permit from you, right? To set something temporarily up on the beach to do a wedding. It would be a great site, for someone to get married. We'll have the rooftop. You know, we're never really gonna be catering. We're not, no offense to we're not a Caddy's, we're not a restaurant that's really, we're a hotel that's trying to maintain a really upscale boutique, hotel. But we will wanna have service on the beach with the city's approval for the type of...
For special events.
Yeah, for the type of event we're gonna do. I think our second floor restaurant, which is, on top of our parking that will have staircases down to the beach, some of that land may be ours, so we'd probably like to have some dining tables down there, not on the beach, but on our property, on that front side, on the beach side. But I think most of it's gonna be walk-up, and, we're certainly happy to talk about it, but I didn't want you to think we hadn't thought about it. I think that it will end up being...
Picturing it something like the DoubleTree situation.
It is something very much like the DoubleTree,
Where
yeah.
there is gonna be some ancillary traffic that comes off the beach, but they're already parked somewhere else. And
Correct.
Anyway, that's whatever. I'm not sure how we provide for that in our recommendation.
Yeah, that's something that you would need to, though. I mean, you can't say, well, we know the guy and he's a great guy, because things change hands and things change over time. So some of the problems they've had here before is even with the completion or the approval of the Golf Grill, as an example, people were so angry that it was Caddy's because they were told it was going to be a high-end steakhouse when they first designed it, and it's a different clientele. Things change. So zoning can't be specific to the person standing in front of you. If you've got something specific you want in a plan, or you do or don't want happening on a development, and it's a PD, then you need to specify that in the recommendations and the language that you...
So are you suggesting, Linda, that currently, with what you're putting forward here, that we're not allowed to have people that aren't hotel guests?
No, we did not support...
All right, so where are we going with it?
But I know that there are places, for instance, in Treasure Island, hotels that have seats out on the beach, and that I will drive from here all the way there. So it's not just the people who are on the beach, but I've driven all the way there to eat at those places. Everybody does. You've got to assume that if you're going to be serving, you want to fill your table. So the permanent placement of tables for ongoing restaurant activity, service increases the capacity of the restaurant, which increases the impacts, and all of those would have to be addressed per table, just like we did with the rest of the parking. So the parking we're including, and the traffic impact, is based on the number of rooms and the number of tables you have right now. It's expected that you would have some events now and then, but to have an ongoing presence on the beach with a whole nother setup for permanent service would definitely change the impacts we'd have to consider and send off to DOT. A fully operating restaurant or hotel, you have the camera, you have some big stuff going on in there, and a lot of people come in. We just have to consider what impact that's going to have in an environmentally sensitive area and what people's expectation is. And I think it's important that we talk about it, even if they approve it, because we want to have it on the record. It was discussed, and we're not looking at caddies all over the...
I guess I'm just searching for what you'd like us to do. If you want us to get get that granular right now into detail of what we would expect to have happen.
That's a use
And
thing,
build
yeah.
more parking spaces, then we can do that, right?
Mhm.
You know, because we don't want, we want to be friends with the city and have everyone feel that we're doing the right thing. So, you know, at the end of the day, you know, obviously, if you open, you know, a rooftop bar on the beach, people are going to walk up, but some people are going to want to drive up,
Drive up.
right?
Mhm.
So now we are going to offer valet parking, right?
Mhm.
Valet, you can fit a lot more parking on your site if you're valeting everyone than if you're not, right? So, but there will come a point where our valet has to say, geez, I'm sorry, these spots are reserved for our guests, we can't take anyone else here to park, right?
Mhm.
So we can, you know, we want to be transparent about it. We're not trying to make it like, we're not turning this into a food and beverage outlet, you know, we really are.
It's important too to realize that during turtle season, all of the movement and traffic and putting chairs and tables out on the beach are definitely going to create a problem and a conflict issue with the turtles.
Then we won't conflict the turtles. We'll have to work around that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Representative from the attorney?
That's a long title. Robert Eschenfelder again for the record. So, I'm not overwhelmingly comfortable with throwing out, general things that you all may wish to impose or address without any more thought going into it. I mean, I think that it's kind of incumbent on the staff to, if there are concerns about, issues of how many tables are to be on the beach or you know, capacity issues or hours of operation, that I think the first thing that happens is let's look at the code, the rest of the entirety of the city code, and see if some of these things aren't already addressed in the general code, because we may be, you know, talking about stuff that's already spoken to. If it is something that remains a concern that is not already spoken to, then I think probably before coming to you, staff should talk to the applicant, and then the two of them, before the next meeting, should figure out, is there an agreeable limitation on table capacity or hours of operation or whatnot. I'm certain, for instance, with the turtles, that's already dealt with in the code. But I don't think that y'all should kind of on the fly be trying to, everyone's gonna say, yeah, we don't want a lot of people on the beach, you know, but that really needs to be quantified, you know, in the calm of a conference room table or whatever, as opposed to, you know, in this setting. So I think probably, and you're not voting tonight anyway, but so between now and the next meeting, Ms. Portal and her colleagues could get together with the applicant and work out that concern, and maybe she will come back with adding past her 7 items here 4 additional items. That'd be my recommendation.
And I agree with what you're saying there, but I think what Linda was getting at is that she just wants to kind of have our thoughts. Since it's quasi-judicial, we can't talk about it unless we're here, or else we're violating the Sunshine Law. Is that correct?
Well, right, but I'm not talking about y'all talking about it. I'm talking about she's going to go back with the applicant and say, you know, that we're concerned, we the city staff are concerned about this, and so rather than coming back next time and telling you about the problem, coming back next time and saying, because we all recognize that this is a potential problem, here is a solution, here is a condition that I, staff, am recommending to you all to include in your recommendations to the city commission.
Correct. She could just add to her staff recommendations. Okay. Now, Ray, do you have a comment?
I do, Ray Kerr. I have 2 questions. One for Linda first is, are you preparing a list of variants from code that we would be able to see prior to actually making a vote on that?
This is, this list that I have given you in here without, at the end it says provided. These are the things that are actually required for a PD. And we made sure that they met all of the requirements for the PD level, the concept plan. But yes, there will be additional detailed items that'll be addressed in the final site plan, because that's when you're laying out and measuring everything. Right.
Separate presentation?
Yes,
So like
yes.
one being the height issues, the number of stories. That's the big,
Well, that's a big picture thing we need to be addressed here, because that's part of that's the impact.
Are there any others, setbacks or whatever, that I didn't see? I looked through that list and you read it. I didn't know if there was any other big picture items like that were really.
No, I think that the only big picture item is the one that I'm mentioning, is just the concern about the assumption that there's all this wide open space behind you and you can continue to operate, fully outside if you own the property, is not going to work because of it subverts the stated impact and intensity of the use. So, and also the environmental impact. But I would be glad to sit down with the group here. They've always been really cooperative. And the reason I'm bringing this up now, and I know it seems like I've thrown them a loop here, but is because we've just gone through all of this on the beach with caddies. And I know that the issues are going to rise when we come to the city commission. I'd rather that we got a recommendation from you that was based on work we did together. So I agree with Rob. I was hoping that's where we go with this. You do have the second part of this hearing coming up, so give us a chance to sit down and just make sure we all understand all the issues and have answers for them, or it won't get past the commission anyway. So, and
Yeah, and it could be, but, it's their private personal business, but everybody knows that these kind of developments, they've monetized everything already. So they've done the spreadsheets of, here's how much we're going to pull out of this property monthly. And so they probably already know that does or doesn't rely on outdoor dining. That does, and so those things, I think that they could be frank with Ms. Portell whenever between now and the next meeting, and just talk that through. They may be totally fine with agreeing to some limiting language that will please everybody. That should just be discussed.
Okay, thank you.
And I had a follow-up.
Ray had a second.
I'm still not 100% understanding the density piece, where I understand, if you said some across the street and you had a bridge coming across, and we got here because we didn't want that bridge across Gulf Boulevard. But if the new hotel has this greater density, and it's allowed because we're pulling the density from across the street, can the commission suggest or mandate or whatever, make in their suggestion, they're not mandating anything, that the other property have certain plans? I'll say, let's just say parking. It has to be, we would suggest that our recommendation is based on that other property being so many parking spaces.
yes. So what you're looking at in this PD right now is a unified plan that does include the piece across the street, and that's where the parking is expected to go right now. And we are hoping that eventually the market will support their coming back and replacing that flat lot with some elevated parking and some retail up front, so it makes better use of the urban space. It's more interesting and provides more for people to do on the sidewalk, better for the economy generally. But you really can't do one without the other. Since it's all one development, and according to state law, you can't force a development into two parts, you can't let the road force a separation of a plan. So they are allowed to have a single development plan that is on both sides of the right-of-way. We just have to make sure that it's all planned as a single unit, which is the intent here.
Well, I guess that's my biggest question, that it can be planned as one parcel, even though it's two.
Yes.
And the second parcel you can't build this hotel and then sell that other parcel. Somebody else can build a. Correct.
They could sell it, but they can't do anything with it that's not consistent with the underlying plan here, right? You can kind of imagine it as one piece of property without that Gulf Boulevard running down the middle of it.
That wasn't clear to me in our discussion.
Right. So when we said we transferred, they didn't really transfer. They just placed all the density in one spot. We aren't doing a what's called a density transfer here. They just put all the density on this spot, put all the parking on that, as if the road weren't there. It would be the same as a bigger piece of property with no road in the middle.
And if,
And that's a similar thing too, like you've seen even bigger properties, like Carillon, I think was.
Yes, right, right.
and if this were approved, and it went to the DOC and they approved it,
Mm-hmm.
and then the value of this property became higher because this was all approved, and the current owners decided, well, I don't want to spend the money to develop it now, I'll just sell it to somebody else to develop it,
Mm-hmm.
because we already have the approvals.
Right, so anybody, this approval and this site plan establishes the density and intensity of those two pieces of property together. So later on, if they tried to do something else, they would actually have to do not only a zoning change to make a new plan, they'd have to do a land use change, because the density, any increase in density would basically trip the land use density and intensity that are allowed there. Remembering that on the R3 on the beach side, a mixed use the buildings can only be 20% non-residential or non-tourist. So they can't change the whole thing into a 2 or 3 story restaurant, retail, and things like that. We have to adhere to the land use criteria, the underlying land use, which is also limited. That changing a land use is no simple thing.
Thanks for the clarity.
Robert?
One last question, I guess it's for Linda for clarification. So on the caddies, there is some language in there permitting for liquor or license or whatever for services to be kept on the property rather on the beach. Is that similar language that would be used in this environment as well?
Oh, yes, you could. They are going to have to get an alcohol license separate from this. It's not implied in the PD. And at that time, additional conditions can be placed on the alcohol license. It would be a lot cleaner if they knew ahead of time, you know, in the PD what we were looking for. But either way,
So is the
possible when they come back for alcohol, the community asks for something additional.
Is the recommendations to be put in now or at a subsequent meeting?
The alcohol?
No, so you don't have the, right now caddies can't put tables and all that stuff on the beach.
Right.
So where do we put that into this agreement? Is it at a later date or now?
I would suggest that if you're worried about the impact on the beach, it should be in the PD, because the alcohol only addresses what you serve at the tables. So if you don't want activity out there, or you want to specify how activity is conducted on the beach, then this is the place for it. The alcohol license really just addresses the alcohol. Now, Caddy's mostly a bar, so without alcohol, they aren't. Or they're large. They have a large portion at the bars, not mostly, but because I'm sure they're meeting all the credentials for the restaurant. But it's a lot more integral to their overall activity.
So I would like language. I like the project, but I would like their patrons and their facilities to stay on their facility as much as possible, rather than trashing up the beach with tables and stuff like that. So how do we put language in there to do that?
Well, that was something that we were going to talk about. So how about you let us take a crack at addressing the issues and see what the options are for them. And it also gives you the time to think about, you know, what kind of restrictions you think would be appropriate, and we can address them when we come back for the final vote.
Okay, thank you.
Because there may be ways we can address all those things that satisfy everybody's concern.
Thank you, Robert. Applicant?
Yeah, Jack Bosiak. Linda, I just want to be sure that, and I'm not talking about this one way or the other, but I think that one of the things you need to be sure of is that you don't conflict with existing procedures or regulations or, my recollection is, there's not a prohibition against liquor on the beach, correct?
There's not. No.
And there also, I believe, is a walk-up, credit on parking, or there used to be. Is that still, something? At one time, there was a walk-up credit.
Not in our code right now,
Well, my only point isn't pro or con, one or the other. I'm saying you need to kind of consider, like cabanas on the beach that a hotel would put out.
Sure.
Can they serve their clients out there?
Exactly.
You
need to
have wristbands, if they have.
right.
I mean, I think that this is a lot more complex than just saying, so I do think it takes a lot of consideration as to both the operation of the hotel and how it interacts with, in other words, somebody coming down and bringing bottles and, setting up in a cabana on the beach and having a party. But you can't serve a drink, so these kind of considerations, whatever the regulation is that you come up with, I don't think that the owners are trying to make an abusive thing of, we want to have, tables on the beach and all this. But I think you got to really understand it, Chair. And I know that there are guidelines that are in place already about drinking on the beach and cabanas on the beach. And you got to consider if a cabana is allowed on the beach and somebody's allowed to come in and set up, essentially a private bar in there and serve on the beach or drink on the beach. You got to be careful about the regulations.
If somebody's serving and having that level of activity on the beach, and if they're actually taking money for the alcohol, then it doesn't work.
No, wait, I'm not.
No, I understand what you're saying.
I'm saying people come out and party. I'm just trying to say is, you have to kind of consider what's allowed on the beach, so that however you come up with your recommendation, it accommodates equally how everybody deals on the beach, and
It's a good point. We don't have a lot of commercial on the beach, is why we're dealing with this right now.
I did not intend to mean
Right.
commercial. I meant, people go out there on the beach and they bring their coolers, and, I know somebody whose name will go unmentioned that actually had a little pontoon boat that he used to go off the beach and sell drinks on, and that's been.
Yeah, we won't be doing that, yeah.
But I mean, interpretations, they're crazy things.
Exactly, which is the whole point in our
I
sitting
think
down and.
There are, when you take your overall consideration, that how do you stop people from coming up, getting a drink and walking out on the beach and sitting into it's a tough one. It really is a difficult, so you need to really put a lot of consideration into this,
That's a lot different than, there's Robert Preston, that's a lot different than having tables set up by the hotel.
No, I wasn't saying that.
That's totally different than,
Mm-hmm.
Myself.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, but before, we've.
Hold on, let's hear from the.
We've kind of broken down on the orderly quasi-judicial process here, and we've got people jumping up and, even after they've closed their case. So I think probably procedurally, if it is the will of the board to continue to hear this discussion at this time, the applicant would need to make a motion to the board to reopen their case in chief. But just to speak to, a lot of the discussion that just occurred is exactly precisely what I was advising earlier that needs to occur between the applicant and Ms. Portell and other relevant city staff, not doing all of this negotiation here before you all. But I want to respond to just one thing that was said by the applicant's representative about treating them the same as you're treating anybody else. Certainly, part of my comment was that Ms. Portell will be looking at the current code to see what's addressed and see if that might address the issues. But if not, this process is all about departing from the normal part of the code. That's why it's a development agreement. There's the concessions on both sides about density and all that kind of stuff, and part of it can be an operational concession that the city says, we need you to concede that you're not going to do this. And if you don't concede you're not going to do this, then we're not moving forward. That's a conversation, at least initially, that needs to happen between Ms. Portell and the applicant. So I think with the commissioner's question earlier of how do we get this going, you all have already given your consensus that is how you want it to occur. So unless the board wants to allow them to reopen their case, my advice to you is just You've given Ms. Portell the marching order about this issue. Let her see what she can work out and bring it back next time.
Okay, thank you. I think you're absolutely spot on, so
was
I
just
think
gonna
we'll just, if you can get with Linda on it,
Yeah, I totally agree.
you know, then
Yeah,
I think
I've
that's, and that way we can move forward and keep things rolling. We don't want to wallow in the mire and caught in the weeds here, so, thank you. And, do we have any other comments from anybody? Okay, then I think, Linda, didn't you have, or can we open it up to public comment?
Yes, yes,
Is
we
there
do.
anybody from the public who would like to speak?
I have one sent in by email, and then there may be other people want.
Would anybody like to speak from the public first before the emails? Please come up and state your name. And I think we're supposed to keep it to 3 minutes, please.
Hi, my name is Kurt Miller. I'm a business owner in Madeira Beach on Gulf Boulevard, actually right across the street from this project. And I just wanted to say, like Mr. Preston over here, I fully support this project, and we're taking 3 of the worst, underdeveloped, but prominent because it's next to the public parking. 3 of the, just very underdeveloped lots, and making it into something that the city can be, and the residents of the city can be proud of. So I fully support this. I hope we can work out these little minutia issues and, get it going forward. Thank you.
Do you mind stating your address for the record?
14603 Golf.
Thank you. Anybody else from the comment that would like to speak? From the public that would like to make a comment? If not, then Linda, could you address the emails from?
Yes, thank you. This was from Mr. Mike Burke, and he lists himself as president of La Coquina Condos. Dear Commissioners, I write on behalf of the board of La Coquina Condos, a 4-story, including at-grade parking, residential building at 14401 Gulf Boulevard, Madeira Beach, on the east side of Gulf Boulevard, beside the planned development. I wish to express the disappointment of the board in the revised proposal to rezone PD 2021-01 to allow an apparent 7-story building at 14500 Gulf Boulevard. We believe that this will be out of character with, the neighborhood, is contrary to the master plan, and should not be allowed to create a precedent along Gulf Boulevard. In particular, we are disappointed with the reference in the planning staff report that this property previously enjoyed general public support. This was at the 5-story level, including from us. That support was in recognition of the previous proposal's 5-story compliance with the master plan. Such support should not be applied to this 7-story proposal. This one is not and does not deserve such support. The only rationale given is an alleged need to increase its height for economic reasons. If that is to be the rationale for increased height of zoning, there is really no need for a master plan at all. While the master plan is now quite dated, at page 74, it recommends that building height shall not be more than 6 stories, including at-grade parking. This approach should not be ignored on a one-to-one basis, even if there is the application of a planned development. The master plan encourages redevelopment on the east side of Gulf Boulevard to enable a more balanced built form of the east and west sides of Gulf Boulevard, allowing exemption on the west side to go even higher than permitted in the current master plan. This will further exacerbate the difference in the building form, not bring the built form closer to a balance. The goals of the master plan have been largely met to the betterment of Madeira Beach and the 3 neighborhoods which are emphasized therein. There should not be this one-off type of development approved until such time as there have been a deliberate look at the County Park neighborhood, something which was not done in the master plan. This process would allow the heavy traffic and east-west pedestrian risk, the need for redevelopment along Gulf Boulevard outside the three main villages and the safeguard which should accompany all such redevelopment to be considered in a comprehensive manner. We object to the proposed plan development as presented. Michael Burke, President, La Coquina Condo, 14401 Gulf Boulevard, Madeira Beach, and the email is given.
And now that's the only email from,
That's all that we've received as of today, yes.
okay, well, thank you.
I do think that it would be important that I point out, you have the opportunity to ask questions, and since they're not here, I did want to make a couple of clarifications. The master plan that's being referred to is the Diwani plan that was adopted in 2002, but what was not adopted, it was presented. It was a community-wide effort, but it was never adopted, and so it does not regulate anything. And for the most part, none of its conditions have been met, none. There was practically no development in accordance with it, and the updated master plan that addressed the downtown area was a complete departure from it, and the final master plan that resulted in the town center was considerably different than anything in that master plan. So that's not something we can use as a regulating tool here. You've been provided all of it. It was the basis we were using for some of our comp plan changes and our mobility efforts, but it's not something, as you know, that was ever adopted up to this point. I also think it is important to note that at some point, about 2 years ago, I think when we were first going through all of this, I did a review of condo and hotel buildings, the multi-story buildings along Gulf Boulevard on the beach, because there's this perception that everything's 3 to 5 stories, but that's not the case. Actually, the mode of stories is 7. They are generally 7 stories high. And then we have others that are much taller down here on this end. As you know, they're 11 and 12-story buildings. I'm not sure where that perception came from. I know that in Diwani's work, they regularly recommend a 5-story cap, or generally a 5-story fence in order to get a pedestrian feel that doesn't overwhelm people. On the other hand, the same organization that proposes that annually makes a list of the most walkable cities, which include Chicago, New York, Seattle, and things that are many, many, many more than 5 stories. It's really important what you design on the bottom. That's why we're talking about a mixed use on Gulf Boulevard. But when you're standing in front of a building and you're looking in the window at something interesting, you don't know whether it's 5 or 7 stories. It's not affecting you that way. So most of the concern for stories and height here is going to be the view that people have from further back from the beach. And I'm not to diminish that concern, but it does not follow that because of that it's a very low intensity city on the beach.
Yes, no new tall buildings now that my tall building's built. Okay, so since we're not making a motion on anything, I think we can move on.
I would like you to continue it to a time certain, please.
The motion would be to continue the public hearing to a date certain of April the 5th.
Okay, very good. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
To continue the public hearing to the date certain of April 5th.
I'll second that.
Okay, let's go to the vote, please.
Yes.
Mr. Brooks? Yes. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Mr. Kerr?
Yes.
Mr. White?
Yes?
Mr. Noble?
Yes.
The vote passes unanimously.
Okay, thanks, everybody, and thank you. And, okay, moving on. Agenda item number 6, old business. We have no items. Number 7, administrative presentation. Mr. Kerr has submitted an email for open discussion. believe we all have read that email. Does the city have something to add for that?
No, I don't. My plan had just been to answer questions or to provide you more specific information about the FEMA standards.
Okay, Ray, since your email, why don't you,
Can't hear you, Ray.
he said he's looking for the
looking-
email.
Ray Kerr, I'm looking for the email. I just kind of wanted to read it real quick. It's been a while since it was written. Bear with me.
Page 77 of 77.
It was related to FEMA goals and objectives.
Yes.
I'm just going to read it off real quick because how does FEMA interface and impact with the residents of the city, the county, and the state? Is FEMA's goal to reduce the insurance liability? Is this why they rate the city's policies and enforcement? If so, the help of Linda Cheney, should city explore the FEMA incentives to the residents to become FEMA compliant? I'm going to just stop there for a minute. We talked about several times that it's important to the city to have a good rating with FEMA. So that's the first question. Why is it important to the city? Is it important to the city because it's important to the residents of the city to get their insurance rates down? Because the FEMA will give the residents a lower insurance cost based on the city's management?
FEMA is basically an insurance program. So, yes, their intent is to minimize risk, specifically to residential properties. They do not insure or back insurance for commercial. That's a separate, they're on their own commercial. And the reason it's important that we have a better rating is that we get a 5% discount on our insurance for every new 100 points that we can, or well, actually it's more like 1,000 points that we earn. So our rating currently is a 7. We were a 6 when I got here. We went through a review with them, and they dinged us for things that happened 8 years ago, which there's no way for us to fix. And so we'll have to ask for an interim review again because they've complimented on how great our program is. We have a lot of support. We're getting a lot of response from throughout the county and the state on how well we've structured our program. And I have to take the opportunity to thank Jenny Rowan for that and for Tamara Harvey because Jenny helped create the program. There was nothing here, and I was by myself. So Jenny came in her first, she jumped right in to help us get ready for that cycle review. And Tamara has taken up the responsibility and her job of participating in it fully. It's a huge record-keeping task, and there are all kinds of things that we have to perform every single year just to squeeze out a few extra points for our rating. And we very seriously believed that we should have gone from a 6 to a 5 at least before, and instead they gave us a 7. It was really discouraging. But we'll keep working on that. Now, the difference was you were a 6 before, and you had a 20% discount. You went to a 7, and now you have a 15% discount. So for every time we bump up a number, you pay more insurance. Now, if we get to the point where we're a 10, we're just thrown out of the program altogether. Another thing that could get us thrown out is if they do even a random review of our elevation certificates and they find errors on any more than 10% of them, you are automatically thrown out of the program. And it's not only a matter of paying more insurance, and that could be substantial. If you had a 20 or 15% discount and suddenly you have no discount, it could be big because some people pay a whole lot in insurance. But beyond that, if you are not compliant with or you choose not to participate in the CRS program, you are not eligible for federally backed mortgages anywhere in the city. You also are not eligible for grant from the federal government or the state government. It can shut you down. So So we work really hard to make sure that we're meeting all of the criteria and the review procedures, and that we have all the records in place. And it really is a full-time occupation, keeping up with it. Every year we have to file reports, big reports. And so that's what the rating does for us. Now,
What I was really trying, pardon me, but
right.
what I was trying to dig down to, I understood the discounts for residents
Mm-hmm.
insurance, but as far as the grants, I was not aware of that, and the federally backed mortgages. Is there any other items that the city, the grants is huge enough, but I was just wondering, I'm just trying to compile an idea of, or a full understanding.
Any time that you put yourself in opposition to the federal government or the state government, there's the potential for all other kinds of problems, because we cooperate with all kinds of state agencies just to get through a development review process, and you really don't want to be non-compliant.
I get that.
So there are other things that they could make uncomfortable. Every now and then a city gets in trouble, like they find when they do the review that they've issued permits they shouldn't have, or people are there were a couple of communities up in the Northeast that lost their credentials altogether because it was found that illegally and secretly people had been filling in their downstairs and using them for occupied space in the garages. And they weren't permitted, but they had gotten away with it. And they canceled the CRS program altogether, and they usually give them a certain number of years to come back into compliance. I know when they were coming for our review and they looked at our elevation certificates and they said, we had some questions about things, and it was 8 years worth of certificates and we all just got here. So we got those back and realized that the surveyors had not all filled them out perfectly. And the only way to correct that was to get in touch with all these surveyors and have them make the corrections and send us new forms. In some cases, when we looked at the new forms or the old ones, we realized that they had been inappropriately approved. There were houses that had closed in their flood vents, some that didn't ever have flood vents, but claimed on their plans they did. And we were so concerned about the impact it was going to have in getting our 90% correct that the city undertook making changes to people's house. We put flood vents in some people's houses. We discovered that all these new buildings out here at the city, all of them were improperly built. And the levels of all of our electrical service and our mechanical services were off, sometimes only by an inch or two. At the marina, we had to lift all the facility or the units up and slide a pad underneath them to get them high enough. But here at the city, we had to shut down operations, bring in Duke, and rerun power to this building, and a huge changeover at the rec center. They were like 4 feet low or something crazy like that. So we spent a lot of money in a very frantic, short period of time to make sure that when we sent these new elevation certificates back in, they were not only correct, but they met all the the buildings met all the program considerations. That's the kind of level you have to go through, because when they're looking for 90% correct, you don't have much wiggle room, you know. You can mark a page number on your reference down wrong, and they throw it out.
And Commissioner, too, Ms. Bertel and I have been working, unfortunately, because part of your question dealt with can there be a grant program to help people become compliant, and the city some years ago got involved in that. There's a federal statute and federal regulations setting up such a program. They work through Florida, through the state of Florida. The Division of Emergency Management is their Florida-based grant administrator. The city entered, I think, like 8 or 9, I can't remember, different agreements with owners of homes to basically demolish their homes and rebuild them to be compliant. And we're now in litigation with several of them. People would buy a property, begin the demo process or begin the construction process and then flip it to another person. And it's very difficult because this federal program, FEMA tells Florida to contract with the city. The city then contracts with the individual homeowner. And there are obligations that that individual homeowner has to do and meet and satisfy that then the city has to get, and the city has to give that to the state on behalf of FEMA, and they have to bless it. Unfortunately, if the homeowner doesn't cooperate, or if FEMA decides to read a particular term or condition, and that's, in one of our cases, they're now reading the term square footage differently than everybody thought square footage was. Now, what happened is the city has already paid, or the homeowner has already spent, $100,000 or more, and FEMA's saying, we're not going to give you that money. And so it's a huge financial risk. So if there's programs that FEMA wants to establish directly with homeowners where the city and its treasury is out of it, that'd be a wonderful thing. That's not how FEMA operates. So if it was a very sad lesson that we're still having to dig out from, so I don't think at least the current commission would want to go back and participate.
That's correct.
When you were speaking of federal grants, are you strictly talking about the FEMA grants?
No, it would be potentially any federal grants. Yeah.
Good to know.
Mm.
But the whole point of me putting this together was to, my understanding, the whole 50% rule, all the paperwork that goes with it, and you started your comment that FEMA's role or FEMA's goal is to reduce their liability.
Yes.
And they feel, I guess they feel that the best way to do it is by having this 50% rule. But my suggestion was to speak with some of the people, such as Linda Cheney, or Chris Christie, or any of the, on the political side, at the state level, that they talk to FEMA about incentives. Interest rates are low. Some people may want to make their property FEMA compliant.
Mm-hmm.
They come down here and retire. They find out that tearing down their house and building a new house is a lot more than what they would have expected. And they since they're at their end of their career, they may or may not have the long-term ability to get that financing to do it. They may have the assets, but you're not going to get a loan to do this type of construction with having just the assets unless you can pay for the whole thing yourself. So that was one item, and then the other was to talk about, I found out since I've written this that Linda Cheney is already presenting a bill that the home values stay at the pre-mitigation level. So for anyone
affected by the floods.
By that. So if you had a home at X and you tore it down and you built a new home that was by the compliance, it would still be valued at X property value.
Right.
Now, when you sold it, of course, that's when they,
when they get the next guy.
Then the county would get their property tax. But I just wanted to bring that into discussion that I think that the carrot and the stick would work much better than just the stick.
Definitely. And actually, this whole bit with the mitigation program, we had gone through several cycles of it over the years and had done a number successfully, but they changed the rules to the point where they were just unusable. And the city ends up with all the responsibility for administering the program for which they have no rights whatsoever. And we get reimbursed like $14,000 off of a project, and we've been working on some of these for years and years. There's no way we're getting our money back out of it. And on top of that, because we reimburse in anticipation of reimbursement from FEMA, in some cases, the city paid for these new houses, and then FEMA changed their rules and said, we're not going to pay you that money reimbursement. So now the city's bought somebody's house. And our only remedy is actually to take the property. So we've had people lose their homes. we, as a city, have not taken any yet, but we have had to threaten to do that because the city's out several $100,000 on having built people's houses for them, or paid for it, and we didn't build it. But we, obviously, you can't do that with public funds. That's a no-go. And what's frustrating about it is that kind of program, a study was done about 2 years ago in Texas after Harvey. That particular kind of program cost FEMA $10 for every one they distribute to a property owner. $10. So I don't think the purpose in the program at the bureaucrat level is the same as it is at the legislative level. That is, that it just employs a whole lot of people, honestly. And because it would be so much cheaper in the long run if FEMA would say, look, if you tear down your house and either leave it vacant, the lot, you sell it to anybody who comes along next is going to have to build a post-firm house. That if you tear it down, or if you want to use it towards building another one, here's $150,000. Just show that you got rid of the old one and we're good. And it would save a lot of money. It would get rid of, because a lot of people would say, wow, $150,000 towards a new home, you know, plus I don't have insurance problems and I don't have flood problems anymore. I mean, a lot of people would take that, you know. That's a good opportunity. And we'd get rid of so many more houses on the ground and so much more risk. But that's just too simple, you know.
A lot of people, you know, I've had this discussion with a couple to see where I'm off base, and I always get that comment, well, why don't they just give a certain amount to do that? And that's my suggestion wouldn't cost FEMA anything, because they would, all they're doing is, all they're guaranteeing is a low interest loan, whatever that interest rate is, and right now they're the lowest they've ever been. If they can guarantee it based on the value of the property, it hasn't cost them anything. And a lot of people could do it. But, you know, I just thought with all the planning we're trying to do and elevate the roads, and if we could incentivize people to rebuild.
Right, exactly. We would love that.
I think we'd be.
We need to stay on top of these things, and you know, we have legislators who are interested in doing something. Lynn Cheney was very, very strongly hoping she'd be able to make a difference and get us some attention after ETA, and very quickly learned how FEMA works, basically not at all, on a local level. It's very frustrating. It's nothing that an individual legislature, especially at the state level, is going to be able to take on their own. But some of the problem we're having with our program really is at the state level. As far as we know, FEMA is providing funding through the state, and the state is our roadblock. It's the state officials who've changed. We've had houses that got built according to an approved FEMA plan, and then once they were up, had to take the balconies off because they changed their rules about how they were counting the square feet. To take parts of a house off, you know, how much more money went into taking the parts off than it ever cost to build the thing to begin with. That's the kind of thing we've been dealing with, and that's coming to us at the state level.
Again, they're giving you money. My suggestion is don't give anything besides the guarantee.
Yeah. Well, we aren't doing that.
And then you're getting your own money.
You've got federal banking laws and the authority of any given federal agency to guarantee a loan. It's a very complex.
Yeah.
If FEMA's enabling that, doesn't allow them to do that, Congress would have to deal with that before any.
Okay, let's see if any other, buddy's got a comment.
I do. I've got, for discussion, just one thing, if we can put on the agenda for one of our future meetings, is how parking is, I think our parking, let me rephrase it, I think our parking doesn't relate to reality as far as businesses and hotels and stuff, because they don't take in consideration the bartenders, the servers, the people that do all the work. They only take into consideration the hotel, let's say the hotel room.
Yeah,
And
I
the
think
amount
that, I think we talked about this, and if you send that to Linda, then she would add it to the agenda. Is that the proper procedure? Instead of like, we tried to get rid of the open discussion.
I was just wondering if we could get it add to the
Right, I
agenda
think
next
that
week.
she was asking us, though, to send her an email, so that, or would you just, is
Well-
this good enough, will you take that into
This is good
consideration?
for tonight, yeah, just
Okay.
asking to add some.
So if you could add that to the next
Sure.
agenda?
Sure.
Good, Robert? All right.
That's good, thank you.
Okay, so no other questions regarding Ray's email, or anything from staff? Okay, then moving on, agenda item 8, no open discussion items. And then 9, our next meeting, is everybody gonna be able to make? It's just a couple weeks, April 5th, 6 p.m. That's the schedule back to our regular,
Right.
not the first day of the month, like that was very tough to do, but okay, so we're back at a normal Monday meeting, and then no information materials, so agenda item number 11, this meeting is adjourned.